The alarm systems at the Dragonhold had protected the fortress for over 3,000 years without a single failure. These weren't simple security cameras or metal gates. They were advanced quantum barriers that could read intentions, psionic shields that burned through minds with hostile thoughts, and guardian machines powerful enough to vaporize entire warships before they got within a mile of the walls. So when every alarm in the massive Crystal Palace started shrieking at once, Dragon Queen Valara assumed the impossible had finally happened. War had come to her doorstep. She launched herself from her throne, her massive wings spreading wide enough to cast shadows over half the throne room. Behind her, 20 elite dragon guards in gleaming armor followed, their claws ready, their fire building in their throats. They flew through the winding corridors of living stone, expecting to find enemy soldiers, assassins, or some new terrible weapon that had finally cracked their defenses. The royal hatchery sat at the heart of the Dragonhold, buried deep underground where the planet's natural heat kept the precious eggs warm. It took them less than 2 minutes to reach it, but those 2 minutes felt like hours. Every dragon's worst nightmare was playing in Valara's mind. The eggs were everything. Each one represented a future child, a continuation of their ancient species that had already survived too many extinction attempts. They burst through the final reinforced door, ready for battle. What they found instead made absolutely no sense. A human child stood in the center of the hatchery, completely alone. He couldn't have been older than 8 years, though Valara had to admit she wasn't great at guessing human ages. The boy was painfully thin, like he hadn't eaten properly in weeks. His clothes were torn and dirty, covered in dust and what looked like engine grease. His dark hair stuck up in every direction, and his face was smudged with dirt. But none of that was the shocking part. The shocking part was the golden dragon egg he clutched in his trembling arms. The egg was massive, nearly half the size of the boy himself, and it should have been impossible for someone so small to even lift it. Dragon eggs weren't just heavy with physical weight, they were dense with concentrated magic that made them feel like trying to hold a collapsing star. Yet this scrawny human kid was holding one like his life depended on it. Around him, arranged in careful rows on beds of precious gems and rare metals, sat 99 other eggs. Each one was priceless. Each one was irreplaceable. Each one represented months or years of waiting for dragon parents who desperately wanted children. The hatchery was the most sacred place in their entire civilization. And this child had somehow walked right into it. Valara's head of security, a scarred old dragon named Brutus, was already running diagnostics on his tablet with shaking claws. His voice came out as a confused growl. Impossible. The quantum locks show no breach. The psionic wards are fully active. The guardian constructs are all functioning perfectly. According to every system we have, nobody has entered this room in the past 6 hours. Well, clearly something is wrong with your systems, snapped General Helena, the captain of the guard. Her silver scales were bristling with rage. Because there's a human child standing right there with our future in his arms. The boy flinched at her angry tone but didn't run. He couldn't run, really. They had him surrounded. 20 massive dragons, each one big enough to swallow him whole, formed a circle around him. There was nowhere to go. Valara raised one claw for silence. Her guards instantly obeyed, though she could feel their fury radiating like heat. In the 3,000 years of the Dragonhold's existence, no one had ever successfully stolen from the royal hatchery. The fact that the first successful thief was a human child made it somehow worse. Humans were considered primitive by most galactic standards. They barely had faster-than-light travel. They hadn't even mapped their own spiral arm of the galaxy yet. She stepped forward slowly, careful not to make threatening movements. The boy's eyes were wide with terror, but underneath that fear, Valara saw something else. Determination. Desperation. The look of someone who had nothing left to lose. Child, she said, keeping her voice as gentle as a dragon's voice could be, do you understand what you've done? The boy nodded slowly. His lips were cracked and bleeding, like he'd been in the sun too long without water. Do you know what the punishment is for stealing a dragon egg? Another nod. A tear rolled down his dirty cheek, but his grip on the egg only tightened. Then why? Valara asked simply. The boy's voice came out as barely a whisper, but in the silent hatchery, every dragon heard it clearly. My sister. Lily's dying. The egg told me it could save her. Several dragons hissed in disbelief. General Helena's tail lashed angrily against the stone floor. Lies. Humans cannot hear dragon song. You lack the neural structures. It's biologically impossible. But Valara wasn't listening to her general anymore. She was watching the egg in the boy's arms. Because the egg, that beautiful golden egg that had been laid just 4 months ago, was doing something eggs should never do. It was glowing, pulsing with warm, golden light that seemed to beat in rhythm with the boy's racing heart. Queen Valara made a decision that went against every instinct her guards had. Instead of throwing the boy into the dungeon, she wanted to see his sister. The other dragons thought she'd lost her mind. General Helena argued for 20 minutes straight, her voice getting louder and angrier with each passing second. But Valara was the queen, and her word was final. The boy's name was Jack Reed, and he led them to a crash site on the nearby moon that orbited their planet. The journey took only minutes by dragon flight, but what they found there would haunt Valara for the rest of her very long life. The colony ship had been called the New Horizon, a massive vessel designed to carry 300 human settlers to a fresh start on an unclaimed world. But something had gone catastrophically wrong during their jump through hyperspace. The ship had been torn out of faster-than-light travel and thrown into normal space right near the dragon homeworld. The crash had been violent and brutal. The wreckage spread across half a mile of the moon's gray surface. Twisted metal stuck up from the dust like the bones of some enormous dead creature. Scorch marks showed where fires had burned for days before the lack of oxygen finally killed them. Emergency foam had sealed some sections, creating little bubbles of breathable air that hadn't lasted long. Jack led them through the debris without hesitation, climbing over torn bulkheads and ducking under collapsed corridors like he'd made this journey 1,000 times. Because he had. Every day for 6 months, he'd searched the wreckage for supplies, for anything that could help them survive just one more day. They found his sister in what used to be the medical bay. Someone, probably Jack, had dragged 3 sleeping pods together to create a makeshift shelter. Emergency glow sticks provided dim yellow light. A pile of empty emergency ration packets sat in the corner, enough to feed 2 people for maybe 5 months if they were very, very careful. The girl was lying on one of the medical beds, covered in a thermal blanket that was torn and stained. She couldn't have been more than 10 years old. Her name was Lily, and she was dying. Valara had seen death many times in her 5 centuries of life. She'd fought in wars, watched friends grow old, held loved ones as they passed. But there was something particularly cruel about watching a child waste away. Lily's skin had turned an unhealthy gray color. Her breathing was shallow and rattling. Dark circles surrounded her closed eyes. Her small hands were curled into fists on top of the blanket, and Valara could see her veins through her paper-thin skin. Radiation poisoning, explained Theodore, one of Valara's medical advisors who'd insisted on coming along. He ran a scanner over the girl's body, and his face grew grimmer with each reading. From the reactor breach during the crash. It's been slowly destroying her cells for months. At this stage, even our best medical facilities couldn't save her. Her DNA is too damaged. I'm sorry, young one, but your sister has perhaps a week left. Maybe less. Jack didn't cry. He'd probably run out of tears months ago. He just walked over to his sister's bedside and gently placed the golden egg next to her. I know you all think I'm crazy, he said quietly, still looking at Lily's sleeping face. But I heard it. Every night for the past 2 weeks, I heard the egg singing to me in my dreams. It showed me pictures of the dragon hold. It told me where to find it. It gave me the path through your security systems. Impossible, Theodore said again, but his voice was less certain now. It told me its name, Jack continued. Sunrise. It said it wanted to meet us. It said it could help. The egg suddenly pulsed with bright light, making every dragon in the cramped medical bay step back in surprise. The golden shell began to show cracks, thin lines of brilliant white light breaking through the surface. No, no, no. Theodore lunged forward. It's too early. The egg isn't due to hatch for at least 3 more months. The hatchling inside isn't developed enough. If it emerges now, it'll die. But the egg wasn't listening to biology or medical advice. The cracks spread wider. Jack carefully moved back, giving the egg space. Piece by piece, chunks of golden shell fell away. What emerged made every dragon present forget how to breathe. The hatchling was tiny, barely bigger than a house cat. Its scales were pure silver, something incredibly rare among dragons. But it wasn't the color that shocked them. It was the way the newborn dragon moved. Instead of the confused, clumsy stumbling that all hatchlings did, this one moved with immediate purpose. The baby dragon, Sunrise, crawled directly to Lily's side. Its movements were shaky but determined. Then it did something that dragons hadn't seen in 10,000 years. It pressed its small forehead against the dying girl's chest, closed its eyes, and began to sing. The song wasn't just sound. It was pure magic, the raw life force that flowed through every dragon from the moment of birth. But hatchlings weren't supposed to be able to control it. They weren't supposed to even be aware of it for weeks. This was different. This was instinct operating on a level that bypassed everything medical science understood. Golden light poured from the hatchling into Lily's body. Valara watched in amazement as the gray color slowly, very slowly, began to fade from the girl's skin. The dark circles under her eyes started to lighten. Her breathing, which had been so shallow and painful, began to deepen and steady. Theodore's scanner was going crazy, beeping urgent alerts. The radiation is disappearing, he whispered in disbelief. The damaged cells are repairing themselves. This shouldn't be possible. The amount of energy this would require, the precision needed to target only the damaged areas without harming healthy tissue. Even our most advanced medical pods can't do this. The process took almost an hour. Jack held his sister's hand the entire time, tears finally streaming down his face. The baby dragon never stopped, never wavered, pouring everything it had into saving this human child it had never even met before today. Finally, Sunrise pulled back, exhausted. The hatchling collapsed onto the medical bed, breathing hard. But it was smiling, if dragons could smile. And Lily's eyes slowly opened. "Jack," she whispered, her voice confused but clear. "I had the strangest dream. There was a dragon made of sunlight, and it said everything was going to be okay." Jack sobbed and hugged her carefully. Next to them, Sunrise made a small chirping sound and nuzzled against both children. Theodore ran his scanner one more time, then looked at Queen Valara with wide eyes. "They are bonded," he said quietly. "All three of them. The hatchling, the boy, and the girl. I'm reading synchronized neural patterns, shared emotional states, even their heartbeats are starting to match rhythm. Your Majesty, this is a true bond. Like the ones from the ancient stories." Valara stared at the three children, 2 human and 1 dragon, curled together on a medical bed in a crashed ship on a dead moon. And she realized that Jack hadn't stolen an egg at all. Sunrise had chosen them. The Galactic Council wasn't interested in miracles or heartwarming stories. They wanted blood. Within 48 hours of the incident, representatives from 40 different species had arrived at the Dragonhold, demanding an emergency tribunal. The council chamber was massive, built to accommodate beings of all sizes, from the tiny insect-like delegates of Hive World 7 to the enormous gas-based creatures from the Outer Rim. Floating platforms and gravity-adjusted sections allowed everyone to observe the proceedings comfortably. Jack stood in the center of it all, looking impossibly small. He wore clean clothes now, provided by the dragons, but he still looked like what he was, a scared kid who was way out of his depth. Lily sat beside him in a hovering chair, still weak despite Sunrise's healing. The baby dragon perched protectively between them, her silver scales gleaming under the harsh courtroom lights. She was already twice the size she'd been at hatching, growing at a rate that amazed the dragon scholars. The head judge was a stern creature named Ambassador Krell, a reptilian being from a species that prided itself on following rules above all else. His scales were deep purple, and his 4 eyes could look in different directions simultaneously, giving him an unsettling appearance. When he spoke, his voice boomed through translation devices built into every seat. "We are here to judge the human child Jack Reed, who stands accused of violating the Sacred Egg Protection Treaty of 2847, Article 12, Section 9. The theft of a dragon egg carries a mandatory death sentence across 17 star systems. The law is absolute and exists to prevent the extinction of the dragon species, which nearly occurred during the Collector Wars 3 centuries ago." Jack's appointed lawyer, a nervous human diplomat named Robert Chen who'd been pulled from the nearest embassy, stood up. "Your Honors, I submit that the circumstances here are completely unprecedented. My client didn't steal the egg for profit or power. He was trying to save his sister's life, and the egg itself." "The law makes no exceptions for circumstances," Krell interrupted coldly. "If we allowed emotional justification to override legal consequences, chaos would reign. Every species with legends of dragon power would attempt similar thefts, claiming noble intentions. The dragons would be hunted to extinction within a generation." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. Many species feared dragons, respected them, or wanted their power for themselves. The strict laws were the only thing keeping the dragon population safe. Queen Valara rose from her seat in the dragon section, her presence commanding immediate silence. "The Council speaks of protecting my species as if we are helpless creatures who need your laws to survive. But perhaps you forget that dragons existed long before your council was formed. We survived the Ice Age of Worlds. We survived the Plague of Stars. We survived your Collector Wars, despite your best efforts to protect us resulting in the deaths of thousands of our eggs. Ambassador Krell's scales darkened with irritation. Your Majesty, your personal feelings do not override council law. The treaty was signed by your own grandmother. And perhaps my grandmother made a mistake, Valara said quietly. The chamber erupted in shocked gasps. Dragons never admitted mistakes. Perhaps we all made a mistake when we decided that rigid laws matter more than examining the truth of each situation. The prosecutor, a tall humanoid with blue skin and no visible emotions, stood up. The truth is simple. The child committed the crime. The law requires punishment. Anything else is sentiment clouding justice. That's when Jack did something nobody expected. He stood up, his legs shaking but his voice steady. Can I talk? Robert grabbed his arm. Jack, no. Let me handle this. But Jack gently pulled away. He walked forward to the central platform where everyone could see him clearly. Lily tried to follow, but she was too weak, so Sunrise hopped down and walked beside Jack instead, her tail swishing nervously. I know you all want to kill me, Jack said, and the bluntness of his words made several delegates shift uncomfortably. I know what I did was against your laws. And you know what? I don't care. The chamber exploded. Delegates shouted in dozens of languages. Ambassador Krell slammed his gavel, demanding order. But Jack kept talking, his voice getting louder and stronger. My parents died in the crash. Everyone died except me and Lily. We were alone on that moon for 6 months, and we screamed for help every single day. We used the emergency beacon. We sent distress signals. We did everything we were supposed to do. And nobody came. His words cut through the noise like a knife. The shouting slowly died down. I watched my sister dying a little bit more every day, Jack continued, tears streaming down his face now. She stopped being able to walk. Then she stopped being able to sit up. Then she could barely breathe. And I couldn't do anything except hold her hand and watch her fade away. Do you know what that's like? To be completely helpless while the only family you have left is dying right in front of you. Some of the delegates looked away. Others stared at him with expressions that might have been sympathy. Then I started having the dreams, Jack said. Sunrise showed me where to go. She gave me hope when I had nothing left. She didn't care about your laws or your treaties. She just cared about helping 2 kids who needed her. He pointed at the assembled delegates, his hand sweeping across the entire chamber. You all have laws about protecting children. About family. About helping people in distress. I've been reading them for the past 2 days while waiting for this trial. The Galactic Council was founded on those exact principles after the Extinction Wars, when entire species were wiped out because nobody helped them in time. Ambassador Krell leaned forward. Your point, child? My point is that you're all hypocrites, Jack said flatly. You write beautiful laws about compassion and helping others, but when it actually matters, when real people need real help, you hide behind different laws that let you ignore them. You'd rather follow your rules than save lives. The prosecutor stood up angrily. You cannot speak to this council with such disrespect. Why not? Jack shot back. You're going to kill me anyway, right? So I might as well tell you the truth. You failed us. Your laws failed us. Your system failed us. The only one who didn't fail us was Sunrise, and she's just a baby who's not even a week old yet. Sunrise chirped loudly and spread her small wings, as if agreeing with every word. Then she did something that changed everything. She began to sing. It wasn't the healing song she'd used on Lily. This was different. This was the ancient dragon song, the telepathic language that only dragons could speak and hear. But somehow, every being in that chamber felt it. The melody bypassed their ears entirely and spoke directly to something deeper, their hearts, their souls, whatever part of them remembered what it meant to be young and scared and desperate. The song told Sunrise's story without words. It showed them her dreams inside the egg, where she'd felt Lily's pain and Jack's desperation calling out across space. It showed them the moment she decided to hatch early, knowing it might kill her, because saving these children mattered more than following the natural order. It showed them the bond, the beautiful impossible connection between 2 human children and a dragon who chose love over survival. When the song finally faded, there wasn't a dry eye in the chamber. Even Ambassador Krell looked shaken, his 4 eyes blinking rapidly. Queen Valara stood again, and this time her voice carried the weight of 5 centuries of wisdom. 10,000 years ago, humans and dragons were bonded. We built wonders together. We explored the stars together. We were family. Then came fear and pride, and we told ourselves that the partnership had been a mistake. We rewrote our histories to forget what we'd lost. She looked directly at Jack and Sunrise. This child has reminded us of something we desperately needed to remember. The greatest strength of humanity was never their technology or their numbers. It was their absolute refusal to accept the impossible when someone they love needs them. And maybe that's exactly what our laws have been missing, the understanding that sometimes love matters more than rules. The silence in the council chamber stretched on for what felt like hours. Ambassador Krell sat motionless on his raised platform, his 4 eyes fixed on Queen Valara. The other delegates whispered among themselves, their translation devices creating a low buzz of dozens of different languages mixing together. Jack stood in the center of it all, holding Lily's hand tightly while Sunrise pressed against their legs. Finally, Krell spoke. Your Majesty, your words are moving. Truly. But the law exists for a reason. If we make an exception here, what prevents the next theft? What stops every desperate parent in the galaxy from attempting to steal dragon eggs, claiming their situation is equally special? Before Valara could respond, something unexpected happened. A delegate from the back of the chamber stood up. She was an elderly being from a peaceful farming world, her species known for staying quiet during most political debates. Her name was Elder Patricia, and she'd served on the council for 40 years without ever causing controversy. Perhaps, she said softly, her voice amplified by the translation system, the problem isn't making an exception to the law. Perhaps the problem is that we've created laws that punish children for trying to survive. Another delegate stood, then another. Soon, dozens of representatives were on their feet, each one wanting to speak. A fierce debate erupted that would later be studied in political science classes across the galaxy. Species that rarely agreed on anything found common ground. Others that had been allies for centuries discovered they had completely opposite views. A military commander from a warrior culture argued that showing mercy was weakness. If the child goes unpunished, it sends a message that dragon security can be breached. It invites attacks. But a scientist from a medical research station countered, the child didn't breach anything. The dragon hatchling gave him access. This wasn't theft, it was rescue. There's a fundamental difference. The debate raged for 3 hours. Jack was eventually allowed to sit down, exhausted from standing so long. Lily had fallen asleep in her chair, her head resting on Jack's shoulder. Sunrise curled up in their laps, watching the arguing delegates with curious eyes that seemed far too intelligent for a week-old hatchling. Throughout it all, Queen Valara remained standing, silent, her massive form a constant reminder of what was really at stake. She was remembering things she hadn't thought about in centuries. Memories that her own grandmother had told her to forget, calling them embarrassing remnants of a foolish past. She remembered stories of the bonding age, when young dragons would seek out human partners and together they would accomplish incredible things. She remembered tales of dragon riders who fought side by side with their bonded companions, not as master and servant, but as equals. She remembered the art, the music, the architecture that came from that collaboration, wonders that hadn't been matched in the 10,000 years since the partnership ended. And she remembered why it had ended. Not because of any great betrayal or terrible war. It had ended because dragons had become proud. They'd started believing they were superior to humans, that the short-lived, fragile beings weren't worthy partners. They'd convinced themselves that the bonds were holding them back from achieving true greatness alone. But what had they achieved in those 10,000 years of isolation? They'd become powerful, yes. Feared and respected. Protected by laws and treaties. But they'd also become smaller somehow. Less creative. Less willing to take risks or try new things. They'd gained security but lost something essential in the process. Enough, Valara's voice cut through the debate like a blade. Every delegate immediately fell silent. I have heard your arguments, and I have made my decision. As the ruling monarch of the dragon homeworld, I invoke my ancestral right to pass judgment in matters concerning my own species. Ambassador Krell's scales paled. Your Majesty, the Council. The Council may advise, but it cannot command me in affairs of dragon law, Valara said firmly. That was established in your own founding documents, specifically to prevent the dragons from being controlled by those who fear our power. She descended from her platform, her wings spreading wide as she glided down to where Jack, Lily, and Sunrise waited. The chamber was so quiet you could hear individual heartbeats. Jack Reed, Valara said formally, you stand accused of stealing a dragon egg. How do you plead? Jack swallowed hard. His lawyer had told him to show remorse, to beg for mercy. But he'd never been good at lying. Guilty, Your Majesty. I'd do it again if I had to. A small smile crossed Valara's face. That is what I hoped you would say. Because a child who would sacrifice everything for family is exactly the kind of human that dragons used to seek out for bonding. She turned to address the entire chamber. My judgment is this: Jack Reed will keep Sunrise, because she chose him just as much as he chose her. Lily Reed will also be recognized as bonded, since the connection was formed to save her life. But there are conditions. The prosecutor leaned forward eagerly, hoping for harsh punishments. But Valara's next words shocked everyone. Jack and Lily will come to live at the Dragonhold. They will be enrolled in our academy, where they will learn the ancient ways of dragon bonding that we foolishly abandoned. Jack will train as a dragon knight, the first of his kind in 10 millennia. He will study our history, our magic, our combat techniques. When he comes of age, he will serve as an ambassador between our species, ensuring that the mistakes of the past are never repeated. She looked at the council. Furthermore, I am opening the Dragonhold to human students. Not many, we will be selective. But orphans, refugees, children who have nowhere else to go will be welcome to study alongside young dragons. If bonds form naturally, as they did with Jack and Sunrise, we will celebrate them rather than fear them. The chamber erupted again, but this time it was different. Some delegates cheered. Others protested loudly. But underlying it all was a sense that something fundamental had just shifted in galactic politics. Ambassador Krell looked like he'd just swallowed something sour. Your Majesty, this is highly irregular. The Council will need to discuss the implications. Discuss all you wish, Valara said calmly. But you cannot stop me from educating children on my own world. You cannot prevent bonds that form naturally through mutual choice. And you certainly cannot execute a child for a crime that resulted in the first successful human-dragon bond in recorded modern history. She placed one massive claw gently on Jack's shoulder. The boy looked up at her with wide eyes full of hope and fear and exhaustion. You came to my world a thief, Valara told him. You will leave as something far more important. You will be living proof that the old ways were not foolish, they were forgotten wisdom. And perhaps, if we're very lucky, you and Sunrise will be the first of many partnerships that help both our species remember what we lost. Sunrise chirped happily and nuzzled against Valara's claw. Even Lily, who'd just woken up, managed a weak smile. The prosecutor stood one last time. And what of justice for the crime? What message does this send? Valara's eyes flashed dangerously. It sends the message that we value life over law. That we choose growth over stagnation. That we remember our true history instead of the comfortable lies we've told ourselves for centuries. If that troubles you, Ambassador, perhaps you should examine why the idea of mercy makes you so uncomfortable. 3 months had passed since the trial, and the Dragonhold had become a very different place. Jack stood on the training grounds, his muscles aching from another brutal practice session. His instructor, an ancient dragon named Master Roland who'd fought in wars before Jack's great-great-grandparents were even born, circled around him with critical eyes. Again, Roland commanded. Your stance is still too wide. You'll lose balance when Sunrise makes a sharp turn during flight. Jack adjusted his feet, gripping the practice staff tighter. His hands were covered in calluses now, something that would have seemed impossible just a few months ago when he'd been a starving kid barely able to stand. The Dragonhold's food and training had transformed him. He'd gained weight, grown muscle, and discovered that he was actually pretty good at combat training when he wasn't dying of radiation poisoning. Sunrise swooped down from above, her wings now spanning nearly 15 feet. She'd grown incredibly fast, already the size of a large horse, though she was still considered a baby by dragon standards. Her silver scales caught the morning sunlight, making her look like she was made of liquid mercury. She landed beside Jack with practiced grace, and he immediately swung onto her back without needing to think about it. 3 months of constant practice had made the movement automatic. Better, Roland grunted, which was the closest thing to praise he ever gave. Now, let's see if you can actually stay on during combat maneuvers. Sunrise, Pattern 7. Sunrise launched into the air so fast that Jack's stomach dropped. She twisted, dove, rolled, and climbed at angles that should have thrown him off a dozen times. But he held on, his legs gripping her sides, his body moving instinctively with hers. The bond between them meant he could feel what she was about to do a split second before she did it, giving him just enough time to adjust. When they finally landed 10 minutes later, Jack was breathing hard but grinning. Roland actually nodded in approval. Not terrible. You might actually survive your first real flight mission. Maybe. From across the training grounds, Lily called out, "Show off." She was sitting with a group of other young students, both human and dragon, working on what looked like meditation exercises. She'd regained all her strength over the past months and had proven to have a natural talent for the magical side of dragon bonding. While Jack trained in combat, Lily was learning to communicate with dragons telepathically, something that usually took years to master. The Dragonhold had changed dramatically since Queen Valara's decision. What had once been a fortress of isolation now buzzed with activity from dozens of human students. They weren't all orphans like Jack and Lily. Some were scholars who jumped at the chance to study dragon culture, others were diplomats learning to bridge the gap between species, and a few were just adventurous kids whose parents had allowed them to attend the most prestigious and unusual school in the galaxy. Not every dragon was happy about it. Master Roland himself had initially refused to teach humans, calling it a waste of his time. But Valara had personally asked him, and nobody refused the queen. Now, 3 months in, Roland would never admit it out loud, but he'd become protective of his human students. Just last week, he'd gotten into a heated argument with another dragon who'd suggested the humans were too fragile for real training. Jack walked toward the main academy building, Sunrise trotting beside him like an enormous silver dog. Other students called out greetings as they passed. There was Danny, a 12-year-old genius from Earth who was studying dragon technology. There was Grace, a quiet girl from a farming colony who'd bonded with a shy green dragon named Meadow. There was Marcus, no wait, they'd started calling him by his last name, Peterson, who was absolutely terrible at flying but brilliant at dragon history. The friendship surprised Jack the most. Back on the colony ship, he'd been just another kid. Nothing special. But here, he was the first. The one who'd started everything. People looked up to him, asked him for advice, wanted to hear his story over and over. It was weird and uncomfortable and kind of amazing all at once. Inside the academy, Jack found Lily in the library, surrounded by floating holographic books. She was researching something with intense concentration, her fingers swiping through pages of text faster than Jack could follow. "Find anything interesting?" he asked, dropping into the chair beside her. "Everything's interesting," Lily said without looking up. "Did you know that during the bonding age, some human-dragon pairs could share memories? Like, actually experience each other's past? There's a recorded case of a dragon who learned to paint by accessing her bonded human's artistic skills, and a human who learned advanced mathematics by tapping into her dragon's centuries of knowledge." Jack whistled softly. "That's incredible. Think we could do that?" "Maybe eventually." Lily finally looked at him, her eyes bright with excitement. "The records say it takes years to develop that level of connection. But Jack, there's so much they didn't teach us about the old partnerships. It wasn't just about flying together or fighting together. The bonds changed both species. Made them better. Humans lived longer because of the dragon magic flowing through the connection. Dragons became more creative and adaptable because of human influence." "So what happened?" Jack asked. "Why did they stop?" Lily's expression darkened. "Pride, mostly. The dragons started thinking they didn't need humans. And honestly, some humans got scared of how powerful the bonded pairs were becoming. There were political movements to ban bonding on both sides. Eventually, it just faded away. The last recorded bond broke when the human died of old age about 9,000 years ago, and the dragon partner went into isolation and was never seen again." Jack thought about that for a moment. "That's really sad." "Yeah," Lily agreed quietly. "But we're bringing it back. We're proving it can work again." A chime rang through the academy, signaling the start of afternoon classes. Jack and Lily gathered their things and headed toward their next lesson, Galactic Politics, taught by a dragon named Professor Helena who'd served on diplomatic missions for 2 centuries. The classroom was a mix of human and dragon students, sitting in specially designed spaces that accommodated different body sizes. Professor Helena was already there, her silver scales polished to a shine, arranging holographic displays that showed star maps and political boundaries. "Today," she began once everyone was seated, "we're discussing the ripple effects of the Reed case across the galaxy. Jack, Lily, I apologize in advance if this gets uncomfortable." Jack shrugged. He'd gotten used to being discussed like a historical event rather than a person. Professor Helena brought up news feeds from across the known systems. "In the 3 months since the trial, we've seen some fascinating developments. 17 different species have reached out to the Dragonhold requesting similar cultural exchange programs. The Crystalline Collective wants to study dragon magic. The Vex Empire has asked if combat training might be available to their soldiers. Even the normally isolationist Cloud Singers have expressed interest in learning dragon communication techniques." She pulled up another display. "But it's not all positive. There's been a rise in attempted egg thefts. 3 in the last month alone, all stopped before any real damage was done. The thieves claimed they were trying to replicate Jack's success, not understanding that Jack didn't actually steal anything. Sunrise chose him. A dragon student named Thomas raised his claw. "Are we in danger? From people who want to take our eggs." "Security has been increased significantly," Professor Helena assured him. "And Queen Valara has made it clear that attempted theft will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." The difference with Jack's situation was that Sunrise initiated the contact and the bond was genuine. Future bonds, if they occur, will need to form naturally and with consent from both parties.